Chapter 1. The Crypt Scholar. The wind howled through the broken teeth of the mountains like a chorus of the damned, shrieking over ridges jagged as an executioner's saw. Beneath the clawing cold of Sylvania's night, something moved, not with the nervous scurry of the living, but with the patient inevitability of death. A solitary figure stalked across the frost-bitten heath, black robes trailing like funeral veils in the wind. Balthorin Nix, once a scholar of the arcane, now a thing neither living nor entirely dead, descended the hillside toward the ruins of a long-forgotten barrow. His flesh was pale parchment stretched over sharp bone, features sunken, with lips drawn back in a rictus grin that bared long, discolored fangs. His eyes burned dull crimson coals smoldering with a relentless hunger, not for blood, but for knowledge. This was no ordinary necromancer. Balthorin was of the Necrarch lineage, vampires obsessed with magical supremacy, twisted scholars who viewed flesh and bone as mere instruments in the pursuit of arcane perfection. He came to this place not to rob graves, but to harvest potential. The barrow loomed ahead, its broken stones jutting from the earth like the ribs of some colossal corpse. A moonlight-slicked entrance yawned before him, blocked only by time and silence. With a flick of his wrist and a guttural whisper in Nehikaran, ancient sigils across the lintel shivered, cracked, and dissolved into dust. The veil between worlds parted, just enough. He stepped inside. The crypt stank of old death, rot layered over rot, a perfume of mold, spoiled air, and iron tang. His boots echoed softly against flagstones slick with centuries of moisture and seepage. On either side, sarcophagi and stone shelves lay shattered, desecrated by time, or perhaps opportunist with less refined appetites. But deeper still, something waited. Balthorin's fingers traced patterns in the air, symbols of binding, of warding, of ownership. The chamber before him was sealed by rusted iron doors, etched with runes inlaid with dried blood. With a hiss and a pulse of necromantic energy, the iron twisted and fell away, revealing a tomb not of men, but of monsters. The skeleton before him stretched more than 30 feet, curled and broken where it had been crammed into an unholy prison. Great draconic wings, now tattered husks of bone and membrane, lay crushed beneath its own weight. Horns like scythes curled from its skull, and rows of serrated fangs glistened with the resin of ancient ichor. Its spine was cracked in 2 places. Blunt trauma, battle perhaps, elven blade marks carved across its flanks told the tale. This creature had died in war. Balthorin knelt beside the corpse, fingers reverently brushing its fangs. "You are beautiful," he whispered, "and you will be magnificent once more." He opened his satchel, retrieving vials filled with green luminescence, a shard of warp stone wrapped in flayed elf skin, and a blackened heart still twitching with necrotic pulse, harvested from a blood dragon slain only nights before. He began the rite. Foul incantations spilled from his mouth in a guttural litany, each syllable tasting like rust and bile. His blood sizzled as he drew runes in the air with clawed fingertips, the symbols burning red-hot with unholy promise. The barrow trembled. Skeletal remains from other tombs quivered, then rose, twitching like marionettes caught in a storm. Spirits moaned within the walls, bound and broken. The draconic corpse groaned, a sound not of lungs but of bones shifting, sinew twisting as ancient ligaments snapped into place. The warpstone shard embedded itself in the creature's chest with a sickening crunch, merging into bone like a cancerous heart. The dragon's eye sockets ignited, dim at first, then blinding. Pale green flames surged outwards, lighting the tomb with witchfire. Its massive limbs spasmed. Then, silence. The ritual failed. Balthorn's arms sagged. His breath rattled with something close to disgust. "No," he snarled. You are not yet ready, but soon." He turned away, placing the heart back into his satchel. The corpse would remain, a chrysalis waiting to be born. Then he heard it, scuttling. Not undead, not vermin. Something else. He turned, just in time to see a shadow dart through the ruined door, small, cloaked, hunched. Red eyes glinted in the dark, and claws skittered on stone. Skaven. "Filthy watchers," Valthorin hissed. The creature squeaked a warning, retreating into the tunnels like a breath disappearing in mist. So, the rats had seen. Valthorin's smile returned. "Let them come," he whispered to the dead dragon's bones. "They will bring the final peace." And as he stepped back into the night, wind howling through the mountains, lightning crackled in the distance, green, warped, hungry. Chapter 2. The Bone Worm. The sun never truly rose over Sylvania. It merely lightened the fog, lifting the darkness from pitch to iron gray. In the cursed hollow beneath Moor's cradle, where the old barrow had been cracked open like a grave-rotted egg, silence no longer ruled. It had been replaced with the rhythmic thrum of hammer, spell, and scalpel. Deep within the crypt's lowest vaults, beneath layers of dead stone and sacrificial sigils, Valthorin Nix labored with the precision of a surgeon and the obsession of a madman. The barrow had become a sanctum of forbidden transformation. Every slab, altar, and corner dripped with the sweat of necromantic industry. Suspended from chains the width of a man's torso, the dragon's corpse hung like an offering to a blasphemous god. Runes of control and reanimation pulsed across its frame, seared into bone by spells that cracked the air with each syllable. The ribs had been sawed open to allow access to the cavity. Inside, Valthorin worked with the detached calm of a scholar correcting a manuscript. He reached in, elbow deep in the dragon's gaping chest, holding a dripping organ that should not have existed, a second heart, the size of a wolf grown from necrotic tissue fused with warstone crystal. Veins like black iron throbbed with flickers of green lightning. It spasmed in his hands, twitching like a spider's corpse touched by fire. Valthorin's lips curled into something like joy. Almost perfect. A half-dozen undead servitors hovered behind him, stitched things of skin, sinew, and misused humanity. One had a smith's anvil where its face had once been. Another tottered on crow-boned legs, its fingers replaced with iron tongs. They worked tirelessly, hammering armor plates onto vertebrae, reinforcing joints with dwarf-forged steel wrapped in corrupted flesh. The room echoed with the wet sounds of necromancy, the squelch of rehydrated muscle, the crunch of brittle cartilage being reset, the hiss of warp-laced embalming fluid being poured into hollow veins. The creature was no longer merely a corpse. It had become a weapon. Its skull had been reforged with a blend of orichalcum and barrow iron. Its eye sockets fitted with lenses ground from obsidian and enchanted soul glass. Between its ribs, a fluted pipe organ of bone protruded, one of Valthorin's most demented creations. When the beast would breathe, it would exhale clouds of pestilent fog through those pipes, death not by fire, but by disease. Yet Zal'gorrath remained dead. For now. Valthorin circled the beast, casting a critical eye over its growing majesty. The wings still needed work, rotting membranes torn beyond repair. But he had plans. Plans involving the preserved wings of a fell bat titan he had stolen from the vaults of the Tempelhof vampires decades ago. He paused before the skull. "You are a lie made truth. A corpse made warform. You shall become the judgment that flies." His voice dropped to a whisper, low and fevered. "And through you they will remember what true terror tastes like." Behind him, one of the servitors choked, a wet, unnatural gurgle. Valthorin turned, curious, and saw the thing twitching violently. Its body convulsed, spasms traveling up its spine in jagged bursts. Its head twisted too far, eyes bulging. With a burst of sickening pressure, its chest exploded outward. A barbed spear of bone and rusted metal had pierced it clean through. It dropped with a squelch. Out of the shadows skittered a nightmare. 3 Skaven, hairless rat-men, armed with jagged blades and rust-stained armor, burst into the chamber. One screeched and hurled a globed flask. Warpstone gas hissed into the air, green smoke burning the servitors where they stood. Another leapt onto the bone table, aiming to bury its jagged blade into Valthorin's spine. But the vampire was faster. With a flick of his hand, black fire erupted from his fingers, engulfing the assassin mid-leap. The creature screamed as its fur and skin boiled, its eyes melting in its skull before it even hit the ground. The second swung wildly, shrieking in queakish, foam flecking its fangs. Valthorin caught the blade in one hand. He didn't even flinch as it buried into his palm. With his free hand, he drove his fingers into the Skaven's throat, through fur and windpipe and into the base of its spine. He yanked. Vertebrae cracked. The rat screamed, limbs jerking, blood spraying in sickening arcs. The last Skaven turned to flee, only to find itself face to face with the bone maw of Zal'gorrath. Something moved. Not much, just enough. The dragon's jaw creaked open a fraction, then slammed shut. The Skaven disappeared in a spray of red mist, a wet crack echoing across the chamber. Blood rained over the bone scaffolding. Silence fell. Only the steady drip, drip, drip of gore from the dragon's jaw and the hiss of dying warp gas remained. Valthorin pulled the blade from his hand with a snarl, the wound already knitting shut with a hiss of necrotic power. He looked up at his creation. "You're waking, aren't you?" The dragon's eye sockets glowed dimly. No movement, no breath, no will. But something had changed. He stepped forward, placing a hand on its brow. "It won't be long now, my child. The world will learn to scream again." Behind him, the warpstone heart beat once, then twice, pulsing with quiet, ominous rhythm. And far below, deep in the Undercity, a council of Skaven began to whisper. Chapter 3. Elixirs and Entropy. The sunless depths of the Necrarch's sanctum were never truly still. Even in silence, the air moved with a kind of sentient awareness, thick with damp rot and the faint scent of scorched marrow. The heart of Valthorinix's tower pulsed with necromantic energy, unseen but undeniably felt. It was like being inside the gut of a rotting god. At the apex of the tower, where the roof had collapsed long ago and only rusted metal rods jutted into the sky like skeletal fingers grasping for forgotten stars, Valthorin worked. The storm above had not been natural. Emerald lightning arced across the heavens, illuminating the storm clouds with veins of warp taint, casting the tower in flickering shades of sickly green and bile yellow. The winds that screamed around the upper spire carried more than snow. They carried the warp, raw and hungry. A tear in reality had opened somewhere nearby, a wound that festered. Valthorin welcomed it. Before him, suspended in a great alchemical cage wrought from blackened brass and bone, the elixir simmered. A vat the size of a coffin, carved from obsidian and rimmed with runes flaring in necromantic bloodlight, boiled with an ichor neither liquid nor gas. It writhed, it wept, it hissed, in languages long dead. Inside, raw magic churned with unfiltered entropy. The ingredients had not been easy to procure. A blood-soaked fang from a forest dragon, plucked from its skull while it still screamed. The liquefied soul of a Bretonnian knight, condensed into shimmering agony by soulfire crucible. The withered heart of a vampire slain by sunlight. Warpstone dust, smuggled from Skaven blight itself, still twitching with the madness of the horned rat's touch. And binding it all, the ichor of a daemon host drawn drop by drop from a bound abomination sealed beneath the tower's foundation. Each drop screamed, loudly. Valthorin stirred the mixture with a staff made from the spine of a necromancer who had once tried to defy him. It still remembered pain. That was useful. As he chanted, the concoction thickened, darkened. It reached a crescendo, a scream from the vat that had no mouth, but shrieked through reality itself, and then collapsed into silence, stillness. A final breath before rebirth. The elixir was ready. He siphoned it into crystal vials lined with thin veins of silver and obsidian. Each vial pulsed faintly in his hand, warm as a fresh corpse. They would be injected directly into the undead dragon's decayed veins, necromantic arteries reinforced with cursed oils and troll ichor. It would quicken the undead tissue, allow magic to replace sinew and thought to inhabit rot. The first vial hissed as he pressed it to the beast's spinal stem. The fluid vanished into the dragon's body, disappearing between the scales and steel plates like oil into sand. The effect was instantaneous. The room shuddered. Bones within the beast cracked, realigning. Tendons snapped taut across ancient joints. A sound like dry leather tearing reverberated through the tower as one of the wings twitched, just slightly. Enough to send a cascade of dust falling from the rafters. Then came the breath. Not a true breath, no. Not air. But a long, wet exhalation of pestilent gas from deep within the dragon's chest. Its rotten lungs, laced with necrotic algae and embalming tar, heaved once and expelled a gust of miasma so foul the braziers dimmed. Even Valthorion staggered back, covering his mouth with a blackened sleeve. He smiled behind the fabric. Then, footsteps. Rapid, desperate. A skeleton courier, barely held together with wire and sinew, stumbled into the room. Its jaw flapped uselessly, but in its chest cavity it carried a scroll bound in red twine. Valthorin snatched it, unraveling the parchment with a claw. His grin widened. "Glyn's scry knows," he murmured. They saw the spark. The scroll detailed what his own senses had already told him. Skaven had observed the reanimation surge. A warp flare of this magnitude could not be hidden. Now they stirred in the depths of the world, sniffing at the scent of power. Let them come. Let them think they can steal it. A fresh scream shattered the air. One of the tower's lower guards, undead, silent, eternal, had failed. Valthorin didn't hesitate. He leapt from the platform, descending in a spiral of torn robes and smoke, landing 2 floors below in the alchemical wing. A dozen Skaven were already there, scryer storm vermin with glowing green blades and warp-charged rifles. One of them was fiddling with a brass device that looked like a cross between a cage and a detonator. He raised it. "Die dead, thing," he squealed. He never got the chance to activate it. Valthorn's arms split open into a nest of writhing bone tendrils and spears of hardened blood. They launched forward, skewering the rat's face, body, heart. The creature spasmed, twitching in a grotesque mimic of laughter, and dropped. The remaining Skaven panicked. One tried to flee. Another fired a shot that struck Valthorn in the chest. It sizzled, burned, tore through his ribs. But he didn't stop moving. He reached the rifle wielder, seized its head in both hands, and ripped it free from its spine with a wet, explosive pop. Arteries sprayed the floor, blood slicking the tiles in long, steaming trails. The last Skaven dropped to its knees. Mercy, yes, Powerful lord, thing, spare, spar. Valthorin pressed a single finger to its forehead. The creature froze, then burst into flame from the inside out, warp blood igniting like oil. It burned for exactly 6 seconds, then was gone. The vampire turned, blood streaming down his ruined chest. Above, the dragon moaned. A low, guttural rumble, like earth grinding against itself. Its claws flexed. Its mouth opened, and the long tongue of death coiled out. The first real sign of will. Valthorin stared up, feeling the weight of centuries cresting in that moment like a final heartbeat before the scream. "Oh," he whispered. "You shall fly again, Zal'gorrath." Chapter 4. Warp Lightning, Rebirth. Thunder shattered the heavens with a sound like a god's bones breaking. Above Valthorin's tower, the storm had become something unnatural. Clouds roiled like boiling tar, a cyclonic vortex centered above the blasphemous spire. Each bolt of lightning that tore from sky to earth came not in white or blue but in sickly hues of green and violet, warping the air around them as if reality itself flinched from contact. Atop the tower, the final preparations were complete. The platform had been reforged with soul steel, a blend of ghost essence and silver mined from cursed veins beneath the World's Edge mountains. Dozens of ancient totems, carved from bone and engraved with sigils and the tongues of the dead, had been embedded into the surface, all pointing inward toward the central slab. And on that slab, bound by a lattice of black iron and writhing chains of spirit-forged bronze, lay the corpse of Zal'gorrath, no longer just a dragon's carcass. The creature had become a grotesque fusion of draconic might and necromantic artistry. Its wings, stretched wide like sails of ruin, were patched with flesh stolen from fell bats and wyverns, pulsating where blood, false blood, coursed through veins recreated from stitched veins and living cords of reanimated tendon. Where its scales had decayed, Valthorin had affixed armored plates scrawled with incantations, each one etched in blood still warm. Its skull, crowned with spines like a demon's crown, had been hollowed and reinforced. The brain matter, long since rotted, had been replaced by a necromantic lattice grown from a fusion of warlock bone and the preserved, enchanted brainstem of a chaos sorcerer. Wires, veins, and magical conduits slithered through its body like serpents in a nest. Tonight, it would live again. The storm was the key. Valthorin stood before it, arms outstretched, robes billowing like funeral shrouds in the screaming wind. Around him, necromantic pylons hummed with power, glowing brighter as the green lightning above began to spiral downward, drawn, called, commanded. He began to chant. His voice was not loud, but it carried, deep and hollow. Each syllable was a blade dragged across the fabric of the world. The tower trembled with his words. The pylons flared, arcs of energy leaping between them with ear-splitting snaps. Sigils burned to life beneath Zal'gorrath's body, swirling in concentric circles of cursed geometry. The sky split. A bolt of warp lightning, thick as a castle tower and incandescent with unholy rage, crashed down upon the central pylon. It didn't strike the platform directly, no. It funneled through the structure, siphoned by the design of the Necrarch's black science. The energy surged down through the bonework lattice into the corpse. The effect was instantaneous and cataclysmic. Zal'gorrath arched on the slab, every muscle, what little remained, tensing so violently bones snapped free of their mounts. The creature's maw tore open in a silent scream, green fire gouting from its throat as the very essence of the warp was pumped into it. Bones shattered, reknit, muscle pulsed, wings thrashed once, twice, then flailed with such force that the brass chains shattered like glass. One hit a pylon, and exploded in a spray of molten bone shards and cursed steam. Valthorin raised his voice. His chant became a scream of control, a sorcerer's leash, forged in pain and incantation. Runes on his arms burst to light, ancient spells binding him to the creature, a desperate struggle to contain the beast as the warp threatened to burn them both from existence. Zal'gorrath rose, no longer bound, no longer dead. He lifted from the slab, hovering on necromantic winds, its body shedding flakes of grave dust and smoke. Its eyes opened, twin furnaces of balefire. Its chest convulsed, then heaved. A sound followed. Not a roar. No. Something deeper. Something older. It was a dirge. A death hymn of unnatural origin, vibrating the air, shaking the bones of the tower, forcing rats to bleed from their eyes in the depths below. It bellowed, and the sky screamed back. The spell matrix began to overload. Pylons ruptured. Flames raced up the runes as the arcane architecture collapsed. The tower's upper levels began to disintegrate under the strain, stone bursting as if infected. Valthorin dropped to his knees. Blood streamed from his nose and eyes. He had not expected this, not this force, not this fury. His control was slipping. Zal'gorrath turned its gaze downward. For a breathless moment there was stillness. The dragon looked at its maker, its master, and it remembered not Valthorin's words, but pain, the pain of rebirth, the pain of consciousness. It snarled and snapped its jaws an inch from Valthorin's throat, not as an attack, but as a warning. Then, with one thunderous beat of its wings, Zal'gorrath launched into the sky, stone shattering beneath it, the top of the tower collapsing in its wake. The Necrarch fell backward, coughing blood, laughing even as his world came down in smoking ruin. Above, the skies parted. Zal'gorrath soared, its wings trailing corruption like ink in water, streaking across the heavens as the warp storm pulsed once, then faded. In its wake, the dead stirred, and below, deep beneath the ground, in caverns carved by claw and madness, a chittering army of ratkin turned their eyes upward. They had seen the light. They had heard the roar, and now they wanted it. Chapter 5. Breath of Rot. The village of Gryffindor died just before dawn. It wasn't a siege. There were no war horns or battering rams, no marching of boots or clash of steel. What came was quiet, like a sickness exhaled on the wind. And by the time the first rooster crowed, there was nothing left alive to hear it. Zal'gorrath arrived on wings of thunder. The ground quaked before his descent. Trees split at the roots, stones shattered under pressure that defied reason. The air grew foul, heavy with the scent of damp tombs and ancient mold. Cattle broke from their pens before the beast even appeared, eyes rolling white, screams smothered beneath the choking stench that heralded his presence. The dragon landed in the wheat fields, and everything died. Crops blackened in an instant, turning to withered husks. The soil itself recoiled, erupting in boils of pus and steaming black ichor. A single step of Zal'gorrath's clawed foot burst the earth like a corpse's stomach, unleashing a swarm of necrotic flies that whined like damned souls. Then came the breath. The dragon's ribcage expanded with a sound like straining ropes under tension, and its mouth, unhinged too far, far beyond what was natural, opened wide. Its gullet was a furnace of green fire, but what poured out was no flame. It was rot made manifest, a thick fog of pestilence, pale green and filled with floating specks of putrefying matter, rolled into the village like a living tide. The mist crept low, hugging the ground, pouring into windows, crawling beneath doors. Where it touched skin, it clung, soaking into pores like water into cloth. The first villager to die was a blacksmith, awakened by the trembling of the earth. He reached for his hammer, bare-chested and confused, and staggered outside just in time to inhale a lungful of the dragon's exhale. He convulsed, once, twice. His skin blistered, bubbled, burst, his eyeballs liquefied, dribbling down his cheeks in hot streams of milky fluid. Blood poured from every orifice. He didn't even have time to scream before collapsing in a steaming heap, muscles spasming, bones snapping inward like a sack folding on itself. A child tried to run. She made it 3 steps before her feet blackened and crumbled beneath her. Her body melted from the toes up, skin sloughing off like wax in a fire. Her mouth opened in a shriek that never came, jawbone detaching as her face caved inward. All around, villagers fell in grotesque fashion, some erupting in geysers of blood, others twitching as their insides turned to rot. One man fought it longer than the rest, crawling through the filth toward the chapel, eyes locked on the crude wooden effigy of Sigmar atop the steps. He reached the base. He stretched out a shaking hand towards salvation. Zal'gorrath's tail slammed down behind him, demolishing the chapel in an avalanche of timber and screaming crows. The man died beneath the rubble, impaled by a splinter of holy icon. Zal'gorrath did not linger. It was not hunger that had brought him, it was madness. Pain. The compulsion of something that should not exist, dragged, screaming into thought. His mind was a fragmented ruin, a broken choir of memories stitched together by necromancy. He saw through eyes not his own, and every beat of his wings sent daggers of agony through corrupted nerves. But even in that chaos, instinct ruled. Kill, spread, flee. He lifted into the sky once more, wings tearing shingles from roofs with their gusts. The village burned behind him, not with fire, but with decay. Every building now a festering ruin, walls pulsing with slime, bones blooming like flowers in the muck. Far to the east, Valthorin watched through a viewing shard carved from soul glass. The image flickered, unstable, warped by distance and the creature's raw power. He could see Zal'gorrath now, soaring across the horizon, carving a trail of desolation in his wake. The vampire did not smile. He frowned. This was not the controlled fury he had designed. The dragon was not obedient, it was wild, lost in torment and rage. Too early, too soon. And already, forces stirred to claim what was not theirs. Deep beneath the earth, in tunnels carved by claw and chaos, the bells rang. In Skaven Blight, a warlock engineer shrieked in delight as his warp monster screamed with energy. His tiny black eyes gleamed as he traced the energy signature to Sylvania. "What beast thing is this?" he hissed, tail twitching, drool spraying from sharp yellow teeth. He turned to the room filled with twitching apprentices and chittering guards. "Ready snatch teams, prepare cages, we take capture. Flying corpse, monster, we make it ours, yes, yes." Above them, in the rotted skies of the world, Zal'gorrath shrieked, a sound like rusted metal tearing from within, and turned toward the mountains. The hunt had begun. Chapter 6. Wings of Plague. The peaks of the Black Mountains pierced the heavens like the jagged bones of a fallen god. Wreathed in perpetual fog, their summits loomed with grim indifference over the blood-soaked lands of the border princes. Somewhere amid the crags and canyons, ancient strongholds sat abandoned, emptied by time, war, or worse. It was into this place Zal'gorrath flew, trailing corruption in his wake. His wings beat with thunderous force, stirring whirlwinds that uprooted trees and shattered cliffside ledges. The wind beneath him became fetid, heavy with death. Vultures, mistaking him for carrion, descended, and were torn to shreds by the backdraft of a single beat of his wings. He didn't see them, didn't care. The dragon was not aware in any traditional sense. His thoughts were fragmented, a maddening mixture of instinct, pain, and memory shards not his own. He remembered burning, runes etched into bone, the green fire of warp lightning in his chest, Valthorin's voice like razors on glass. But he remembered other things, too, in nests of fire, a battle in a snow-swept canyon, elven arrows, the sting of silver, death, a scream, his own. He roared, a long, shuddering cry that split the sky and echoed through the canyons for miles. Below, nestled in the ruins of a forgotten mining town, a caravan of mercenaries had taken shelter. 20 men, 3 wagons, 2 women, 1 child, a dog. They had set up camp around the broken husk of an old tower, the kind once used by border lords to keep watch for greenskins. Fire crackled in the center of the courtyard. Pots simmered. Laughter even rose from one side, crude jokes exchanged by men too tired to be vigilant. Then the shadow fell. It swept over the camp like a curtain of night. Fires dimmed. The dog began to howl, frantic, ears flat to its skull. The child screamed. And then came the stench. Like rotting meat left to stew in vinegar and bile, like grave mold cooked over coals. It flooded their lungs, thick and oily. Men fell to their knees, gagging, eyes watering. One soldier vomited blood, clutching his gut as lesions bloomed across his arms. They looked up and saw it. Zal'gorrath dropped from the sky like a comet of bone and hate. He hit the ground in a thunderclap of impact, stone cracking, wagons exploding into splinters. 2 horses were crushed instantly, reduced to red smears beneath his claws. The nearest mercenary tried to raise a crossbow. The dragon turned. 1 breath. That was all it took. The breath weapon was not fire. It was worse. A cone of rotting miasma exploded from Zal'gorrath's jaws, a vapor thick with spores and bone dust. It struck the man mid-shout. His skin blistered in seconds, sagging like overcooked meat. His eyes bulged, burst. His armor turned black with corrosion, falling away in chunks as the straps decayed. He collapsed in a heap of liquefied organs, screaming until his lungs melted. Panic spread like fire. The remaining mercenaries scattered, some fleeing toward the cliffs, others hurling whatever weapons they could. A spear clanged harmlessly off the dragon's chest. A pistol misfired, exploding in the shooter's hand and taking 3 fingers with it. Zal'gorrath advanced. His tail whipped through the camp, cleaving 3 men in half. One was thrown 30 feet, his body snapping against a wall with a wet crack, leaving a red smear like finger paint across old stone. Another tried to run, too slow. The dragon's claws came down, impaling him through the spine. He twitched for a moment before being torn apart like a roast bird. The child was hiding beneath the wreckage of a wagon, sobbing into her dress. Her mother, already dying from the fumes, crawled toward her with blood streaming from her eyes. Zal'gorrath lowered his head. He saw them, or he remembered them. He paused. The dragon tilted its skull, as if confused, its rotten tongue snaking out, tasting the air. Its jaw twitched, opening slightly, then closing again. The breath stalled. For a moment, just one, nothing happened. Then a mercenary who had fled to the cliffs fired a shot. A powder magic round. It struck the base of Zal'gorrath's wing, not deeply, but it hurt. The moment broke. With a furious bellow, the dragon turned, jaws wide, and unleashed another plague breath. The cliffs melted. The shooter and 2 others trying to climb exploded in boils and bone, their screams flaring into nothingness. Zal'gorrath leapt skyward again, the beating of his wings shaking the earth. He did not look back. He never saw the child crawl out from the ruins, clutching the corpse of her mother. She did not cry anymore. Her skin had begun to blister. Her eyes glowed faintly green. And deep in the caverns below, the Skaven watched through warp lenses and scrying pools. Snikvold Klangspike, warlock engineer of Clan Skryr, cackled in glee as he saw the dragons soar. So much kill-death power, he hissed, tail lashing. Perfect, yes, we must capture. We must tame, make it. He turned to his aides, slapping one hard enough to draw blood. Prepare the nets, the warp chains. Bring the flesh hooks. We go hunting soon. Far above them, Zal'gorrath soared, the screams of the dying still echoing in his ruptured thoughts. His wings spread wide, casting pestilence across the land. He did not know what he was, but death followed him, and somewhere Valthorn watched and whispered into the void, "You are learning." Chapter 7. Skaven Scent Blood. The bowels of the Under-Empire were alive with agitation. Torchlight flickered off rusting walls slick with fungus and moisture, casting twitching shadows that danced across the rancid stone corridors. Clan Skrya's warforge quaked with activity. Sparks flew from grinding wheels, warp lamps hissed with unstable illumination, and the constant chittering of Skaven voices rose in a cacophony of excited dread. Beneath the forge's pulsating core, the warlock engineer known as Snikvold Klangspike scurried between piles of schematics, rune-etched cogs, and unstable warp batteries, his fur matted with grease and powdered bone. His left eye had been replaced by a warp-enhanced lens that clicked and refocused constantly, while the right eye twitched with a mad gleam that never blinked. Tubes fed into his back, connecting to a brass backpack that hummed with dangerous energy. Snikvold jabbed a claw into the air, addressing a cluster of nervous assistants. It flies. It kills. Mash everything. Saw the green flames. The bone wings. Corpse thing with dragon's shape. We must trap it. Tame it. One of his underlings, a runt with malformed limbs, dared to raise a paw. But it breathes plague fog, yes, kills all. Maybe we die too, quickly. Snikvold turned with the speed of a lash. He drove a daggered claw into the underling's face, punching through eye and brain with a wet crunch. Think smarter, he hissed. Or think never again. The body dropped, twitching. None of the others protested. Snikvold stomped to a large vat set into the floor. Inside, an image bubbled and twisted, the warped visage of Zal'gorrath soaring over a ruined hamlet, wings spreading plague like a priest spreads sermons. The beast's mouth opened in the image, exhaling green mist onto a fleeing crowd. The image shimmered as the bodies burst apart, dissolving in clouds of screaming pus. The engineer's tail coiled in delight. He turned to the central platform where a diagram had been inscribed, a grotesque tangle of hooks, arcane circuitry, and warp-laced nets. Prepare the harness, warp lashes, the brain barb. We catch-cage the flying corpse beast. We bend it, break it. Clan Moulder will beg to borrow. His assistants scrambled. Some fell over each other in panic. Others activated levers that summoned welding sparks and hissed fumes from vats of alchemical fluid. One Skaven hauled a twisted engine onto the platform, an abomination of gears and living sinew pulsing and moaning with each movement. Orbet's Jenny surged. Green lightning flickered through the underground halls. Machines screamed. Somewhere a skittering alarm rose as an experiment. An undead wolf stitched to a rat ogre broke free from its bonds and tore through a squad of handlers before being incinerated by warp flamers. Snikvold didn't even turn. He was too focused. At the far end of the forge tunnel, a gateway opened. From the shadows slithered a representative of Clan Moulder, hulking, hooded, eyes glowing with unnatural light. Its voice came as a growl layered over a hiss. "You speak of a corpse dragon. We smell its wake. Disease. Death. Delicious." Sneakvolt clicked his teeth, eyes gleaming. Yes. Big can crush things, fly fog, breathes poison fog. You help hunt it? Yes? The molder beast nodded slowly. "We bring net beasts, warp mutants. You bring the leash." Together they sealed their pact with a mutual hiss and the exchange of gnawed femurs, ritual tokens of their vile trust. The next day, the first capture team was dispatched. They emerged from the tunnels like rot from a wound, squads of Skaven shock troops, flanked by beasts sown from nightmares. There were spider wolves, their limbs fused with scorpion tails, swarms of plague bats tethered to warp batteries that flared with every squeak, and lumbering horrors of stitched-together flesh, dragging warp-forged harpoons meant to pierce even undead dragonhide. Their destination, the Black Mountains. There, Zal'gorrath had been spotted again, soaring low, wings trailing clouds of taint, roosting in an abandoned fortress long since consumed by ivy and silence. Scouts had seen the rotting structure pulse with unholy light, heard the wind moan like a choir of the damned. They sent in the first scout, a wiry Skaven assassin named Skitch, cloaked in shadow, blessed by the gray seers. He made it 30 feet into the fortress. Then the screaming started. The rest of the team listened from the tree line, ears flattened as the cries echoed out. Wet, tearing noises followed. Then, silence. When they finally sent a rat ogre forward, it came back dragging only Skeek's lower jaw, the bone etched with runes that hadn't been there before. Sneakvolt grinned. "He knows we come. Good. He turned to his team, madness in his voice. "Prepare the warp snares. The hunt begins." And above them, on a shattered tower, half-eaten by rot, Zal'gorrath crouched, waiting, learning. Chapter 8. The Hunter and the Hunted. The sun, if one could call it that, bled through the murk above the Black Mountains like a dying eye. The sky was the color of old bruises, thick with storm clouds and pestilence. Beneath this malignant dome, the slopes writhed with unnatural movement. The Skaven had come. They crept across the crags and ravines like a plague of claws and breathless whispers. Clad in patchwork armor, armed with rust-stained blades, warp guns, and twitching contraptions that leaked green vapor, the hunt pack of Clan Scryer moved with grim purpose. Their numbers surged in waves. Storm vermin in the vanguard, gutter runners flanking the ridges, slavering rat ogres thundering behind. Warp batteries hummed. Mutant sniffers, rat beasts bred to taste the scent of undeath, tugged at chains and foamed at their fanged maws, their tongues blackened with arcane sensitivity. Their quarry was near. On a ridge above, overlooking a crescent-shaped basin filled with gnarled trees and shattered stone, Sneakvolt Clangspike watched through his magnifier. His warp lens clicked as it focused on a cracked fortress embedded into the mountain's edge. The ruins were long dead, windowless, half-catalaxed, the stones seeping a faint green glow. "Pounded," Sneakvolt whispered, saliva dripping from his yellowed teeth. "Corpse beast nests there. Hide sleep, yes. We strike, now." He slammed his fist down on a signal plate. Below, warp fire flared. The first wave advanced. They entered the basin cautiously, spreading in a wide arc. Warp nets were deployed, mesh laced with anti-necrotic glyphs and explosive snares designed to detonate on proximity to undead tissue. Warp fangs were buried in the soil, triggered by pressure or death aura. The dragon didn't move. Zal'gorrath lay upon the upper tower, wings tucked close, ribcage still. From a distance, he could have been mistaken for another ruin, part of the landscape. His bones were mottled with lichen. Moss clung to his skull like a funeral veil. Only the faintest green flicker pulsed within his eye sockets. They took the silence as success. That was their first mistake. The second was sending in the ogres. 2 rat ogres surged forward, dragging a warp hook between them, an arcane harpoon the size of a ballista, powered by pulsing warp coils. They snarled and growled, bloodshot eyes twitching in different directions. One reared and hurled the hook skyward, chain trailing behind like a metal snake. It hit Zal'gorrath square in the chest. A sound echoed that did not belong to the mortal world. The dragon moved. One wing snapped open, with a sound like thunder tearing flesh. A gust followed, so violent the rat ogres were hurled backward into trees. One of them slammed into a boulder and popped, its innards painting the rock like a demented mural. Zal'gorrath rose. Not slowly, not with grace. He lunged forward like a corpse awakening from its grave in rage, claws gouging the stone roof beneath him. The hook tore free of his chest with a gout of black ichor, trailing strings of rotten sinew. He landed in the basin with a quake that split the ground. The Skaven screamed. Not 1 or 2, all of them. They broke formation. Bolts of green energy fired wildly, catching their own ranks more often than the dragon. Zal'gorrath charged. His breath weapon had not fully recovered, but his body was enough. He crushed 5 with a single step. One tried to run. Zal'gorrath's tail whipped sideways, catching him mid-sprint. The Skaven's body split in half, upper torso flying into the treetops, while the legs stood twitching for a moment longer. A storm vermin stabbed him with a warp pike. The metal plunged into rotting muscle, then dissolved. The energy was eaten by the necrotic field radiating off his body. Zal'gorrath's head turned slowly toward the attacker. Then he bit down. The crunch was audible for hundreds of feet. Blood and bile sprayed in a wide arc as the creature was severed at the waist. The jaws didn't close neatly, no. The skull's inner teeth chewed, mangling meat and armor into a pulped slurry that dripped from between his fangs. Snickle watched in horror and awe. Too strong, too soon, he hissed. Fall back, flee run. He turned, just as a gout of plague breath belched across the tree line. The mist boiled across the mountain's edge. Trees blackened, twisted into skeletal forms. The warp lens in Snickvolt's eye flared red as warnings filled his vision. 2 seconds later, half his team was screaming. Skaven bodies writhed in the fog. Fur sloughed off in sheets, armor fused with flesh, melting into grotesque tumors. Eyes exploded. Bones cracked and twisted backward. Some didn't die. They rose, twitching, bound to the residual necromantic aura in the mist. The dragon had made more of its kind. By the time Snickvolt reached the tunnel entrance, only a fraction of his warband remained. He looked back one final time. Zal'gorrath stood atop a pile of broken bodies, wings outstretched, green fire roaring from his chest. Around him, undead Skaven twitched and moaned, newborn abominations serving a master that did not command with words, only with wrath. The hunt had failed. But Snickvolt's grin returned as he ducked into the dark. "We try again, yes," he muttered, licking his teeth. "Now we know what it takes." Chapter 9. Clash in the Swamp. The dead mire had always reeked of death, even before Zal'gorrath darkened its skies. It was a bloated stretch of bogland, where twisted trees jutted from the muck like drowning hands, and thick brackish waters steamed with unnatural warmth. The ground squelched with every step, and the air was saturated with gnats, fat with corpse juice and spores from fungi that glowed faintly green in the perpetual gloom. It was a graveyard for armies that never had names, where banners sank into the mire beside rusted blades and helmeted skulls. And it was here that the Skaven tried again. Snikvolt Klangspike stood atop the rusted remains of an Empire signal tower, now half submerged in moss and slime, his warp lens glinting like a diseased star. He tapped a claw against the side of his skull, signaling through rune-link frequency to the squads moving through the mist below. Now, he hissed into the ether. The beast sleeps. Quiet, sneak, swift, fast. Chain it. Net. Mine. Warp rats crawled through the muck in teams, dragging electrified snares behind them, some carried on their backs, others fed by long snaking cables to batteries mounted on modified ratogriddus. Pylons had been deployed around a clearing, forming a circle of volatile power primed to detonate with suppressive arcane force. At the center, half submerged in the fetid swamp, Zal'gorrath lay still. He looked like part of the land, moss coating his wings, mud crusted over bone and armor, flies nesting in the sockets of his fractured ribcage. The green light of his eyes flickered dimly, like a lantern guttering on the edge of sleep. Snikvolt's breath caught as he whispered to himself. Soon, so close. The signal was given. From all sides, the Skavens sprang their trap. With a deafening shriek, the pylons surged. Green arcs of lightning leapt through the air, striking Zal'gorrath from every angle. Runes on the nets ignited, flashing with skull-shaped sigils, and the rat ogres pulled with howls of effort as the massive meshes tightened around the dragon's form. Zal'gorrath screamed. It wasn't a beast's roar. It was a curse. A shrieking, soul-rending wail that echoed through the swamp like a banshee in agony. His wings thrashed, but the nets bit into bone and sinew, tightening with cruel resistance. His claws raked the earth, dragging trenches in the mire as he struggled to rise. The Skaven cheered. Dozens swarmed forward, weapons drawn, clawing over each other to reach the bound monstrosity. Too soon. The dragon's head turned. One eye flared, brighter than ever before. And then it breathed. Not forward. Downward. The bog beneath Zal'gorrath boiled as his breath weapon sank into the mire, unleashing a bubbling surge of pestilence that erupted upward in a geyser of corrupted gas and liquefied death. The Skaven nearest him dissolved instantly. Their flesh sloughed off in waterfalls, revealing twitching red sinew and yellowed bone before those too turned to sludge. Others tried to run but sank, screaming, as the mire pulled them under like a living thing, now bloated with necrotic power. The warp nets tightened once more. That was their final act. With a deafening crack, the dragon reared, snapping the energy tethers. The pylons burst like overripe fruit, hurling war batteries in all directions. One flew back into a rat ogre, piercing its chest, and detonated. The explosion sent limbs flying and cooked half the swamp into a steaming crater. Zal'gorrath roared and leapt skyward. Two Skaven clung to his tail. They were torn apart in the air, bones raining down like hail. The dragon wheeled mid-air, wings spreading wide, casting plague winds that uprooted trees and flung corpses across the mire like broken dolls. Snicker screamed into his communicator. Retreat, run, fall back, no stay, hold. His words cut off in static as the tower beneath him exploded in green fire, struck by an errant bolt of raw necromantic lightning radiating from the beast. The force hurled him into the air, spinning through smoke and ash before landing in the shallows. Bones cracked. His tail snapped. He couldn't move. Only watch. Above. Zal'gorrath circled once, then unleashed a final exhale of death across the swamp, blanketing the entire basin in plague fog. The swamp died. The waters curdled. Fungi bloomed grotesquely, fanged and pulsing. Nothing moved. Silence fell. Hours later, Snikvolt awoke. his body broken, lungs filled with blood. But he was alive. Barely. He turned his mangled head skyward, watching the shadow of Zal'gorrath vanish into the horizon. And he laughed. A wet, gurgling, cracked laugh. He had seen it. He had survived. "Next time," he whispered, spitting teeth into the mud. "Next time I win." Chapter 10. The Whisper of Horned Things. The Under-Empire festered. Miles below the surface, in a labyrinth of tunnels too ancient and corrupted for maps to survive, the domain of the Skaven twisted in on itself like a diseased intestine. Walls pulsed with fungal rot, and the ceilings wept fluid too foul to name. Steam hissed through cracks in brass piping, and the air buzzed with the drone of mutant flies the size of crows. Every breath was thick with mildew and the stench of rancid fur. Here, in the sacred caverns beneath Screaming Bell Peak, the Grey Seers gathered. The chamber was cathedral-like, a place not of reverence, but of lunacy. Cracked idols of the horned rat loomed on every side, carved from bone, scrap metal, and bound flesh. Their faces were dozens of rat skulls layered together in impossible configurations, mouths perpetually open in silent shrieks of hunger. The bell tolled above them. Once, and twice. Each ring shook the chamber like the heartbeat of a god, echoing into the bones of every Skaven for miles. It was a sound known only to those deemed worthy, or doomed, to hear it. A cloaked figure entered. Tall by Skaven standards, his fur matted with sacred ash and his snout adorned with silver rings, the Grey Seer known as Crypt, the Wretchmouth, shuffled forward. He leaned on a crooked staff wound with the bones of plague-ridden children, and from his hood dripped black ichor, a fluid that smoked where it touched the stone. "Bring him forward," he hissed. The guards obeyed. Dragged between them, half-flayed and barely conscious, came Warlock Engineer Snickvolt Klangspike. His body was a ruin. His back bent wrong, his tail dragged uselessly behind him. One eye had been plucked out by his own warp lens when it exploded mid-battle. His voice, when it came, was a rasp wet with blood and madness. I saw it. Flew like death, screamed like gods, burned everything. Kreese raised a claw, silencing him. "Tell tales, fool worm," the Grey Seer crooned. "This flying corpse, this plague dragon, what did it say?" Snickvolt blinked through swollen lids. It didn't say. It remembered. It thought. Gasps hissed through the seers, sharp and synchronized, like a nest of serpents striking the air at once. Kreese leaned closer. "You lie low. Undead, do not dream. Do not think." Snickvolt laughed, a bubbling wheeze. "Then you go find it. Put a claw to its skull. See what looks back at you." The chamber fell into murmured chaos. Whispers slithered from wall to wall, echoed by unseen mouths in the dark. The Grey Seers, once proud and poised, began to twitch. Some clutched their chests. One vomited blood. Another fell to his knees, squealing prayers. Their visions, always tuned to the warp, had touched the beast through Snickvolt's thoughts, and something had looked back. Kreese straightened, eyes wide. His voice became something deeper, not his own. "It is touched by the Horned One, the Breath-Bearer, the Devourer of the Forgotten. It walks the plague path unknowingly, but it walks it." Snickvolt whimpered. "I wanted it. I tried. You still shall." Kreese extended a claw and touched Snickvolt's brow. The warlock's body convulsed. Warp light erupted from his wounds, screaming green fire. His flesh twisted, coiling like snakes beneath his skin. His arms split into claws. His spine erupted from his back in bony growths. Eyes blossomed across his chest like cancerous flowers. He didn't scream. He roared. When it was done, he stood half again as tall, no longer a rat, no longer a Skaven, but something else. Something blessed. The horned rat had touched him, changed him. Krisk nodded, black fluid trailing from his jaw. You go, you find, capture the worm, we bind it, we make it speak. It shall serve, yes, yes. Behind them, the idol of the horned rat moved. Slightly. His mouth opened a little wider. Snikalt Reborn bowed low. His voice was now 4 voices, echoing, fractured, and filled with hunger. Yes, yes, I obey, I bind it, I write it. And far above, beneath a moon choked by pestilent clouds, Zal'gorrath circled a ruined keep, wings wide, eyes gleaming like coals, lost in a dream. He did not know why he had stopped there, but something called to him from below the earth. Something familiar.